So back to oil pastels, and I'll just do a quick recap. I'm not going to do this whole thing, right, because I don't want you guys just watching me, whatever. But I'll talk a little bit about the drawing. There's a lot of figures today, a few faces. But just a recap on some of the things around oil pastels, right? So, one of the most important things, make sure your pastels are clean, right? They're quite annoying if you pick up a bit of blue on a pink and you go into your area. It's really irritating. So, just as you're working, you've all got bits of paper. Just give them a little bit of a clean after you've used them for a bit or whatever. The other thing then is just on your blending tools. There's sandpaper on your pads, and it's the same thing. So if you're blending a big blue area into pink or whatever, it's great, and then you go into flesh coloured area, it's quite unforgiving pastel. Like you'll get a bit of blue into the pink, and then you'll be like whatever. There's a couple of knives around, and I think they're over there somewhere. But just to mention, sometimes with oil pastel, when it gets really, if you get yourself into a real spot of bother with it, just say, and you've gone really thick and it's wrong and you really want to fix it, you can scrape it off, right? You can kind of carefully scrape it off. It won't get rid of the pastel, it won't get rid of the colour, right? It won't bring you back to the paper, but it will potentially get you to a place where you can put, say you've done her dress out here and it's just totally wrong, it's really thick, and actually the line should have been in a bit. You can scrape that off a little bit, and then you can go back out here with this colour, and it'll take the colour a bit better. So that's just emergency stuff, right? You won't need that. But just in case you're like, oh god, that's really frustrating, and you've got a lot of pastel down and you really want to fix something, you can always scrape it back a little bit, right? So that's just some, almost pastel housekeeping stuff, right? I'm going to do this one. I'm not going to do the full thing, right? I just want to really talk a little bit about drawing and how to start with pastels. So, unlike almost watercolours and acrylics that we've done, pastels are kind of like, the way with acrylics we always say, start with the darks, get all your dark areas in and get your mids, and it doesn't matter, you can go over the dark areas. Pastels are a little bit different. They're a little bit unforgiving when you've gone in very heavy with your very darks, right? And you want to get that back to this. Super difficult, right? Whereas with acrylics or oils, it's different. And then likewise with watercolor, where we go from light to dark, you can always build up that dark. So oil pastels are kind of like you'd be targeting the dark areas as dark, target the really light areas as light, and don't mix them that much, right? It's hard to get the really light areas really dark. It's hard to get the really dark areas really light, right? And you'll end up with that pastel mush, right? Where you can work on mixing a lot is these kind of mid areas, right? So pastel will work really well when you're in these kind of areas, right? So you can put down like a red and ochre, and then you can get pink on top, and you can build it up, and then you can put more ochre on top. So in those mid areas, feel confident that you can mix and you can go back over with light, dark, right? And your tones. It's just be aware of these kind of areas, and these kind of areas. Just be conscious of like, well, that's a dark. I'm going to put the dark down. I'm just going to put it down, right? And same for really light areas. So some people will, on those really light areas, they'll put down a bit of white underneath, and then work that pink over the white, and that'll give you a brighter white. You don't have to do that, but I've seen people do it. So that's just some thoughts on how to kind of approach it. So in terms of drawing, you can absolutely use pencils, and as always, I would recommend you do little thumbnails, right? If I'm approaching this again, I'm always, and this is just me, but I'll always use a little simple grid. And it's just to see where the figure is, right? So you can see, in this example, that grid would help me, right? So it just immediately helps me see where her chest is, where her head is, right? So I know that her head is up here, and I know that her shoulders, I just know quickly, especially with figures, where those important bits are, right? And then I know maybe halfway down again, you're at the waist. So you can just quickly figure out where to place them. Drawing, you can use a pencil, totally cool. That's up to you guys, whatever you're comfortable with. You can also just start with a light colour, like a light blue or like a pink or something, you know, something light. And you can start with that kind of a light colour and just, you know, start getting some shapes down where, you know, where you think things are going to be. So, you know, if I do her head, I'm gonna do it a little bit bigger than it is in the page, because I do want you to be able to see it. So just ignore if this is not, you know, the same as that. But you can just start very loose, right? So just start where, you know, you want the head to be. With figures, I find it's helpful, and again, this is 100% personal preference. But I always find it's good if you can get a good head and shoulders in. Sorry, just realised that's the name of the shampoo. But if you can get a good head and shoulders down, the rest of the, do you remember we were doing figures last week? So if you can get a good head and a good neck, the right direction, if you can get that correct in the beginning, when you do the shoulder line then, you know, and thinking back to our armature idea, do you know what I mean? From there, the rest is actually a lot easier. And that's me now. Some people start with the torso. Some people will start with just like lots of shapes. So it's up to you. But I find that if you can get when you're doing figures, if you can get the head, this kind of figure, if you can get the head in the right space, in the right place, and if you can get the neck and the shoulders with the right line, and if you can get that spacing correct in the beginning, the rest kind of comes quite, you know, it comes quite easily from there, you know, because you've got this structure in already. So you can kind of quite quickly then get the rest of the figure in, right? So I'm not going to follow this exactly because I've made her slightly bigger so you guys can see. But, you know, your chest should probably be around there, and then her dress is going to come in like this, right? Alright, so it's like you can do it quite loose, you know what I mean? And if you're using pencil, you can do the same, right? Because in this, you want the pastel to do the work, you know what I mean? So, you know, you want the colour to do the work, and, you know, her dress is going to come around here, and it's going to come back there, and then it's going to sweep around, right? So you can get a quick picture down, you know what I mean? And then for her face, you know, I'll take a little bit of care, just figuring out where everything is here. So her eye might be there, so again, just get some initial marks down, just to see, are you happy with how that looks, you know, in the beginning. And again, you can use like a light pastel to do that. You can maybe use a pencil, that's fine, right? And you just want to figure out where all these different pieces are, right? So her hair comes around like that, her hair comes up here. Do you know what I mean? So you've got the kind of makings of just how to construct the drawing, right? And again, I'm just using a light blue, right? At some point then, what you can do is you can get a slightly darker colour, and where you're seeing lines that you're kind of happy with, I would want, a lot of them in your pastels, you'll see some of them have a little edge. They're the kind of ones that are good for drawing, and you can kind of make little edges if you just rub, you can kind of make little edges. So, you know, I just want to start marking in some lines for, you know, maybe just features, right? And this is just like where I'm kind of happy. So you see that I've got quite a loose drawing, and it's quite light. And this could be your pencil drawing, whatever. But as you get a little bit more confident that that shape is correct and those lines are correct, you can start putting in, you know, where you think there's going to be little, you know, dark lines, right? You can start just indicating, again, just starting with a little bit of a darker colour, you know, where you think you're happy, right? And this just helps you fix up the drawing where there is a problem, right, as you go. And also just helps you kind of make sure that it's just building it up, right? And you're not totally committing it. You can still probably make some corrections here and there, right? So that's how I would kind of start. So start light, get something a little bit darker, you know, start putting in some marks and some kind of related colours, you know, just start building up the drawing that way. And I wouldn't do too much more drawing, right? I'd just be like, I want the pastels to kind of do the work. So, you know, for example, that's an ochre. You know, I might start putting in, okay, her arm is down here, and I know there's going to be a bit of darkness there, right? But I'm just starting to mark in, you know, along the drawing where you might have some dark, right? So her initial kind of skin tones, just putting them in. Her arm is coming down like that, right? So I'm just along this side of her head, it's probably a bit of shade. Forehead, right? And then you're getting into places like, you know, delicate like places like in the eye socket in there. You know, you might have a little bit of dark there, a bit of dark under her nose. Her chin, right? In here. So you see you can just start adding in some of those areas. And then, you know, on that skin you can start, if you've got large areas where, you know, there's going to be lightness, you know, you can just start putting that in. And it's a really odd pastel. You see that I'm quite quickly just adding in pastel and colour, right? And you'll see you can, on those mid kind of areas, you can kind of quite work it in, right? You can do that quite early on. So you can quickly start building it up a little bit. Again, with your whites, I might start marking in some areas where I know it's going to be quite highlight, you know. So here in her nose, her forehead, her neck has a bit of highlight here, right? Her shoulders definitely have a lot of light. Okay. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the figure. Her hair is actually really dark, right? So, you know, I'm going to start putting in some, you know, you can use navy here, you can as a base, right? And like we were doing in our paintings, you can use navy and then build it up. I'm just going to turn this off because Anne